What if the god you fear most is also the one who can heal you? What if the same divine hand that sends the arrow is the only hand that knows how to remove it? And what if one of the oldest gods in Indian mythology was never meant to fit inside our simple ideas of good and gentle and safe, but was born to remind us that the sacred is sometimes wild? This is the story of Rudra, not the soft god, not the easy god, not the god people approach without trembling, but the howling god of the Vedas, the storm-shadowed archer, the fierce presence at the edge of life and death, the one feared for disease, sudden destruction, and wrath, and invoked for healing, protection, and mercy. In the Vedic tradition, Rudra is an ancient deity whose name is often translated along the lines of howler. He appears as a fearsome divine archer associated with death, disease, storm power, and danger, yet he is also praised as a healer and source of remedies. Later, Hindu tradition closely links him with Shiva, and in many contexts, Rudra becomes one of Shiva's names or an earlier form of Shiva's character. And that is what makes Rudra so unforgettable. He is not a god built for comfort. He is a god built for truth, because real life is not made only of peace. It is made of fever, lightning, fear, loss, the trembling moment between survival and collapse. And Rudra stands exactly there, at the edge, where the wind changes, where the body weakens, where the forest grows too dark, where the sky no longer looks kind, where human control ends and something raw begins. That is where Rudra lives. In the Rig Veda, Rudra is not the center of everything, but he is impossible to ignore. He appears as a marginal, dangerous, uncanny figure, one who must be appeased, one whose anger is feared, and one whose favor is desperately sought. Yet those same early traditions also call on him as a healer, a protector, and the father of the storm gods known as the Maruts. Think about how strange and beautiful that is. The same God who wounds, heals. The same God who terrifies, protects. The same God whose arrows bring suffering, also carries medicine. That contradiction is not a flaw in Rudra's story. It is the story, because Rudra does not represent the kind of divinity humans invent when they want religion to feel safe. Rudra represents the kind of divinity they encounter when life becomes too real to fake. There are moments when the world feels orderly, predictable, gentle, understandable, and then there are moments when everything breaks that illusion. A sudden illness, a violent storm, a death that arrives too soon, a fear that enters the body before language can explain it. Rudra belongs to those moments. He is the sacred face of what cannot be controlled, and perhaps that is why he still reaches so deeply into the human heart, because every person, sooner or later, meets a season where life no longer feels civilized, a season that feels raw, where prayer no longer sounds like poetry. It sounds like pleading. Please do not strike me. Please spare the ones I love. Please turn your arrow away. Please let this pain pass. Please, if you wound me, also show me how to survive it. That is the emotional world of Rudra. In Vedic hymns, Rudra is entreated not to slay or injure worshippers in his wrath. He is feared as a divine archer whose arrows are linked with disease and death, yet he is simultaneously invoked for protection and healing, including as a source of many remedies. That dual nature is one of the clearest marks of his identity, and maybe that is why Rudra feels older than explanation. He is not moralized into simplicity. He is not cleaned up for comfort. He is a reminder that the universe contains forces that do not ask permission before they change your life. But Rudra is more than violence. He is also transformation. Because what is a storm, really? It is not only destruction. It is a breaking open, a tearing of stillness, a rearranging of pressure, a force that says what has been held too long can no longer remain hidden. Rudra is the god of that threshold, the threshold where pain becomes truth, the threshold where fear becomes surrender, the threshold where the human being realizes that life is not owned, not mastered, not guaranteed. And strangely, that realization can become the beginning of wisdom. If this story is already touching something in you, pause here and leave a comment. Do you connect more with Rudra as a destroyer or as a healer? Sometimes the answer reveals what season of life your soul is walking through. There is another reason Rudra matters so much. He is one of the clearest roots of Shiva. Britannica notes that Shiva is considered to have evolved from Rudra, and many important features of Shiva retain Rudra's older, ambivalent character, fearsome yet beneficent, destructive yet healing, marginal yet supreme. In later Hindu development, texts like the Shvatashvatara Upanishad raise Rudra further, even calling him Shiva and identifying him with cosmic functions of creation, preservation, and destruction. That means Rudra is not just an old god buried in the past. He is the fire inside a later revelation. He is the ancient howl that becomes the voice of Shiva. He is the wildness that never disappeared, only deepened. And that matters for the heart of this story, because sometimes what begins in fear ends in devotion. Sometimes the thing we first approach with trembling becomes the very thing we later call holy. Sometimes the storm is not the opposite of the divine. Sometimes the storm is where the divine first became impossible to ignore. Rudra's presence tells us that holiness is not always soft light. Sometimes holiness comes with thunder in its throat. Sometimes it enters life like fever. Sometimes it rips away illusions before it offers peace. And maybe that is why modern people still need Rudra, because we live in a world obsessed with control. We want neat answers, safe spirituality, predictable blessings, a God who fits our schedule and agrees with our comfort. But Rudra will not become that God. Rudra remains the sacred refusal, the divine that says, "You do not control the wind. You do not command life. You do not get to avoid fear forever. You do not get healed only in ways that feel pleasant." That is hard truth, but it is liberating truth too. Because once you stop pretending you are in charge of everything, something softer can finally happen. Humility. And humility is not humiliation. It is clarity. It is the moment the soul stops trying to dominate reality and begins learning how to stand inside it honestly. That is where Rudra changes shape. The god who frightened you becomes the god who strips away your illusions. The god you beg not to wound you becomes the god who teaches you what in you was false, fragile, arrogant, or asleep. The god of disease becomes, paradoxically, the god of medicine. Not because suffering is good, but because suffering sometimes reveals what comfort keeps hidden. That is Rudra's mystery. He is not cruelty for cruelty's sake. He is sacred intensity, the divine force that enters where denial has become too strong, the howl that breaks numbness, the arrow that makes you pay attention, the remedy that arrives only after the truth has been exposed. And in that way, Rudra becomes deeply human. Because how many people have discovered this in their own life? The year that broke them also woke them. The grief that shattered their old identity also stripped away illusion. The illness that frightened them also made them see what truly mattered. The storm they begged to escape became the place they finally met themselves. That does not make pain beautiful, but it makes it meaningful. And Rudra lives exactly there, in meaningful pain, in dangerous awakening, in the sacred edge where destruction and healing touch. So what do we learn from Rudra? We learn that the divine is bigger than our preference for comfort. We learn that what terrifies us is not always separate from what transforms us. We learn that healing is not always gentle at first. We learn that fear, when faced honestly, can open the door to reverence. And maybe most of all, we learn this. The sacred is not only found in what soothes us, it is also found in what strips us bare and leaves us honest. So if your life feels stormy right now, if something in you is breaking, if you are standing in a season that feels too raw to explain, remember Rudra. Remember the old Vedic god who held both arrow and remedy. Remember the one who could wound and heal. Remember the howl inside the storm. And ask yourself, very quietly, what if this terrifying moment is not proof that the divine is absent, but proof that the divine has come too close to ignore? If this story touched your heart, leave a comment and tell me which part of Rudra stayed with you most. And if there is a god, goddess, or avatar you want me to make the next video about, comment the name below. Because sometimes the holiest presence does not arrive like comfort. Sometimes it arrives like thunder. And sometimes thunder is the first language the soul can truly hear.